Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I'm your host, Alan Moore, and today I'm excited to have Michael Kitces back on the show as co-host for this mailbag episode. Now, if this is your first one, on these episodes we reach into our virtual bag of mail and answer questions that listeners have submitted to us. Today we answered 5 questions, which included, when does it make sense to get E&O insurance, and what does the claims process look like? How do I move my clients from an AUM fee structure to a retainer plus AUM fee structure? I have 2 distinctly different niche markets. How do I move forward? Can you elaborate on what it means to be a level fee fiduciary? And should I buy a performance reporter to use with my younger clients, or do they even care? As you can see, these are typically very wide-ranging, which is why they're so much fun. You can find any of the additional resources that we mentioned during the episode at xyplanningnetwork.com/110. Also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN Radio listeners. It's the community of advisors we've all been looking for that's there to provide support when we need it the most. Best of all, it's free. I encourage you to check that out. Again, that's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Without further ado, here is my mailbag episode with Kitces. Hey, Michael, welcome back to the show, man. Thanks so much for taking the time to be back on.
It's good to be back. It's been a little while since we went through the mailbag. We must have a lot of letters virtual letters, emails sitting in the mailbag that we have not responded to in a little while.
Yeah, the virtual carrier pigeons have been filling the mailbag. We've actually been getting more questions via email, which is interesting. So when we first started out, I thought,
because before we actually were getting them by carrier pigeon.
Exactly. So usually we post in the VIP group, soft plug. I'm kidding. This is a hard sell. If you're not in the VIP group, go join. It's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. It's free. And every month or so I post in there, hey, we're going to be recording a mailbag episode. So post your question. And we do get a lot of questions that way. But when we first started the podcast, I expected to just get inundated with email questions. And it actually has not been that way. Most of the questions end up getting put in the VIP group, which is awesome because you get to hear from other people instead of just Michael and myself. And while we're happy to answer these questions as well, it's awesome to hear from the community at large. And we have north of 1,000 advisors inside of that community now that are answering questions. And just to clarify, that is a separate group from XY Planning Network. You do not need to be a member of the XY Planning Network to be in the VIP group. Any listener can join, but it is only available to listeners. So the only time we share the link is whenever I say it in the intro and the outro and that sort of thing. So we'll jump right in. We have a long list and we'll see if we can beat our record of like 4 questions. So
doubtful, but we'll see.
We will see. All right. So the first question is about the exciting topic of E&O insurance. Before I read this question, I will preface this by saying that we have had some listeners request an E&O expert come on the show. So we have reached out to a few folks. So at some point, we may actually have an entire episode about evaluating different E&O policies, what to look for and that sort of thing. But I feel like we can give sort of a cursory overview to this question. As a brand new firm, when do you need to get E&O insurance? For instance, should you get it when you take on your first client? If you get it later on, will it disqualify any work that you've done without insurance? Also, have you had any experience with claims of E&O, how they work and how they're usually settled? So I guess let's break this down. And so part 1 of this question is, when do you actually need to get E&O insurance? My recommendation is as soon as you're registered, just to be safe, right? I mean, I don't know why you would wait, other than I do understand it can be it feels like an unnecessary expense. But I believe what I have heard is that the moment you enter into a contract to provide services, you better have insurance in place as just sort of a rule of thumb across the board, whether it's E&O or business liability insurance or directors, and officers insurance. If you're going to be sitting on a board of directors of a nonprofit or something like that, like you need insurance in place before you get started.
Yeah. I know that a lot of people, they get their firm started and it may be a little while even before they're going to begin actually soliciting clients, right? Like they go out and they register the firm, but they're still getting their website set up and they're still getting other stuff going. And so there's a little bit of a slush period where it's it's not really an issue to not have your insurance coverage in place. The issue crops up the moment you actually solicit and engage a client. The moment there's someone that you're working with, and potentially even when you're still soliciting clients. So you may not have gotten the client yet, but if you're really not careful what you're saying, you can still get yourself in trouble even in the solicitation phase. Hey, I was approaching a prospect and I told them all about how I can get them 10% guaranteed returns in the stock market, and they didn't work with me, but they still invest in the stock market like I was going to give them 10% returns, and then they sued me later because they heard that the market was supposed to be 10% guaranteed, and then it went down and stuff like that. You can still, as soon as you're talking to other human beings you are doing business with or may do business with about investment stuff, you start putting liability on the table. And the important issue to note when you're talking about the timing for E&O coverage is you have to bear in mind that most E&O carriers, they cover claims, they cover events that occur while you were insured, not just you got sued while you were insured for something that you did previously. So you run the risk of creating gaps if you say, well, I'm going to wait until I get my first 5 or 10 clients and have a little more revenue going, and then I'm going to buy my E&O insurance. If you buy your policy and you get sued a month later for something that happened 6 months ago when you were not insured, E&O carriers may not cover you. Now, it actually varies by policy. This is one of those due diligence things to get into about whether they cover prior acts that may have happened before the coverage was in place. But many policies do not, particularly if there was a gap in coverage. You're not just switching over from an old carrier to a new carrier. You started a new advisory firm and you had no coverage previously. So if you're in this for the long run, which I hope you are, E&O coverage is really one of those things you want to get in place early. As soon as you're actually going to start approaching prospects and solicit one of them to be a client, you should be getting your coverage in place. You can buy a fairly modest policy to begin with, because obviously you don't need giant limits because you're probably not working with giant dollar amounts and you don't have a giant number of clients yet, but some coverage in place to start taking care of you if some hiccup happens as you're getting going with your early clients.
Yeah, and this is insurance. This is E&O insurance. This isn't like go online and get your auto insurance in 30 seconds, right? This is a process. There's a lot of paperwork. So to your point about sort of you have the slush time, if you're like, okay, I'm ready to sign up my first client, let me grab that policy, it could take a month easily for you to actually go through the entire process of getting your E&O insurance. So my vote is
they do underwrite it. They are going to look at your information and your history and any regulatory history and infractions. And they're going to have a lot of questions about your business and what you do and what you're not doing. Are you just giving investment advice? Are you managing portfolios? Is it discretionary or non-discretionary? Like there's a lot of stuff that goes on with just having the coverage underwritten, and not to make it horribly scary. I mean, they're not impossibly difficult questions. There's just a bunch of questions. You'll have to answer them and you'll move on. But it's not a like hop online really fast like your auto insurance or even these days some term insurance. There's an underwriting process that's going to take some time and some paperwork that's got to get done.
Absolutely. And so, we have a plan at the XY Planning Network that we went through this like major underwriting process. It took much longer than a month because of the type of plan it is to speed the process of being able to actually get on a policy like this. So that's probably the fastest and cheapest option you're going to find. But that being said, if you're out on your own and you're not a member of XYPN, you just need to get it started. And it is important because ultimately you just never know. This is not, E&O insurance is not coverage for deceptive acts, right? It's errors and omissions. It's oops. Policy. It's I screwed up. I said you didn't need that disability insurance policy. And 3 days later, you get hit by the proverbial short bus and can't work for the next 3 years. Guess who's going to get a certified letter in the mail from an attorney, right? Like that stuff happens. And just because you get sued and have to use the policy doesn't mean did anything illegal, but it's there. It's good coverage and it's necessary, honestly, because one claim for a couple $100,000 and you're probably bankrupt as an RIA. And a lot of organizations, and I'm not sure if any state regulators require E&O. I'm not aware of any that do, but I have been a member of a couple of different associations that required it, and proof of coverage was required, which I don't think is a bad idea. Michael, have you ever dealt with any E&O claims? Have you ever been in a firm that had to deal with one of these?
Fortunately not, at least from our end. We actually did have an incident come up a number of years ago where there actually was a trade error that unfortunately we caught a little bit too late. It had already gone through. We caught it the next day. It had to be unwound. We did have to actually do a new market order to effectively reverse it. It was a pretty affluent client and there was a large dollar amount. So even though the thing only moved 1% or so, it was still probably a $15,000 or $20,000 claim. But trade errors in particular for policies, particularly for large independent RIAs, often have pretty good sized deductibles, and that didn't even cover our deductibles. So we took our consequences and got our policies and procedures much better, and it has never ever happened since. But we didn't even get to the point of needing to submit for an E&O claim. We have also had at least one other incident I can recall. This is probably 8 or 9 years ago. Yeah, well, I guess it would have been about 8 years ago because it was 2009, where client had passed away, so right around the financial crisis. And one of the challenges when someone passes away is that if you're an investment manager on an account gets frozen once they pass away, because technically your advisory agreement with your client dies with your client. So if they're using a revocable living trust or some other trust document, your advisory agreement is with the trustee and can actually continue. But if it's with the individual and the individual dies, your advisory agreement, it dies along with it. And so this was a client who had passed away and advisory account got frozen, and children were not terribly diligent as executors about getting on the case of taking over the account and getting us reactivated as a manager. And they basically just let it sit there for 6 months. And that was the 6 months that the market crashed. And so we got basically a I want to sue you letter from the heirs when they finally got their stuff together and realized that this account had lost a very large dollar amount just because it was a large account. This person had a couple $1 million. So a 20-something% drawdown even on a balanced portfolio through that was a really big dollar amount. And so they basically sent I'm getting ready to sue you. I can't believe you lost all this money and mismanaged. And so we ultimately had to point out, we actually beat the benchmark to the downside. It was a fairly aggressive policy, and we had gotten more conservative. And as much as they were down 20, I think the benchmark on that thing was down 26 or something. And secondarily, we had to point out we weren't actually managing the portfolio at that time period because your father passed away and you ignored all the paperwork we sent you for the past couple of months. So we weren't managing it after he passed away. That's actually on you. And that was the last we heard. But
I mean, you can sue for anything, right? And you can threaten to sue for anything. And in our world, like, there's so many risks that we do run. And it's a necessary part of our business, especially if you do investment management. I have never personally been in a firm that we had to use our policy. We went through a similar trading error that we were able to make right. We swapped one share class for another share class and forgot to say tax-free swap. So that was very important when you do a $19 million trade. So we fixed that one. That took a while. But I have my experience from talking with other advisors that have had E&O claims is that E&O policy providers do work a little bit like, let's say, auto insurance policies, that your lowest cost provider may be the lowest cost because they tend to deny every claim the first 3 times you submit it. So this is something to be aware of when you're going out and evaluating E&O policies, is that you cannot just look at the price, because the cheapest option very well may not be the best service and coverage. So some companies are just going to leave you out on your own to sort of do your thing and let them know what happens. Others are going to be very involved from the get-go just to be sure that you have legal coverage or legal representation, that sort of thing. So you do need to evaluate the strength of the company that you're working with, how long they've been in business. We could go through a whole list of things if you're getting on a group plan and that sort of thing. But
well, I'd say, and the big one in particular, because I know a lot of advisors when they're getting started, they're like, I want to find any coverage, even if it's cheap coverage. And so they buy some of the deep discount E&O policies that route through some of the association groups. And it's a really important thing to note when you talk about due diligence on group policies in particular. Aggregate limits. I'm not going to pick on any organizations in particular, but there are some sizable associations in our space that have things like, we offer this policy to thousands of people, and the whole thing in the aggregate has like a $5 or $10 million claim limit. So like, if 1 out of every 1,000 of your fellow advisors have a substantial claim, your policy is going to get capped out and your claim is actually going to be 0 when you get around to filing your own claim if something unfortunate happens. So, paying attention to things like aggregate limits when you're getting your coverage in place is really important as well. You can get away with a quote unquote small policy, meaning you don't need $10 million of coverage if you don't have any clients yet. $1 million of coverage is probably going to cover most things unless your first client's a bajillionaire. But getting a policy with tons of coverage, but it's really cheap because it's got an extremely low aggregate limit, and that's what makes it cheap, because you're playing basically claims roulette about whether you happen to be the one that claims before everybody else claims.
Right, hoping you have to claim early in the year.
is not the right way to manage down your cost, right? You don't dial down your cost by getting into a low aggregate limit policy, group policy. You dial down your cost by actually just managing what limits you take on, what you're doing, what kinds of deductibles you have. That's the good way to manage it. And the other thing I'd note on this as well that I do think is important to point out before we move on is I see a lot of advisors getting started, including particularly some advisors who have been in the business for a while and have experience and are going on their own and basically say, look, I've been doing this a long time. I know what I'm doing. I know how to not screw up on trade errors, although there's still accidents that happen for a reason. But, I'm like, oh, I know my stuff. I know I'm good at what I do. I know I'm going to do the right thing for my clients, so I don't need coverage. And the problem with this is you are not the only person in every meeting. The other person in a meeting is a client who hears their own things in their own way that may or may not be an accurate reflection of what you actually said in the meeting.
True.
And the number of times that advisors get sued because they absolutely did everything right, and the client heard what they wanted to hear and wasn't happy with the result and then sued the advisor. You may win. It doesn't mean you're going to get away cheap. And, years ago, my first book was on annuities, and I did a bunch of expert witness work for a couple of years on annuity cases, people suing advisors for bad annuity sales. And I had some from the client side and I had some from the advisor side. And the number of good advisors who actually did completely legitimate, appropriate annuity sales and got sued because the client just heard what they wanted to hear and sued them over this thing didn't work the way you said it was going to work. And it's like, well, here's all the paperwork and the stuff you signed that says you understood exactly how it was going to work. When people are not happy with their results, they will make stuff up sometimes because they just want someone to blame and they're looking to pin it on someone.
They want their money back.
Yeah, and they want their money back for something unfortunate that the world does to them. And so, a lot of these advisors, one, they were successful, but they paid their attorney $300 an hour and me $500 an hour to prove their case. So, you were not guilty. $30,000 of legal defense later. So, good news, it wasn't like a 6-figure claim or anything, but it wasn't cheap. And, proper defense is part of what E&O coverage helps to kick in and cover. There may still be a deductible, but it helps to cover this. So, it's not even just about, I know I always do the right thing. That just means you probably won't lose a case. That doesn't mean you aren't going to be sued and won't have to face material costs defending it. It's a risk of the business. It sucks, but it is. And that's why there's insurance for it.
That's it. So the synopsis of the last 15 minutes is go get E&O insurance whenever you start your firm. Moving on. Number 2. I'd like to hear recommendations on taking an existing book of clients on a more traditional AUM model and moving them to a monthly subscription or other sort of hybrid fee model. Do you grandfather the existing book or convert them to one of your new fee models? To better clarify, the client's fees may go up or down under the new model. Do we offer the change, require the change, or leave it as is? Planning will be much more of a focus under the new model, so I'm adding additional services so the experience will improve. What do you think? This is a really common issue that you run into anytime you're trying to make a change. And I think for 2 reasons. One, and I think the hardest conversation that you have to have is whether or not your new fee structure and therefore service model, right? We're not just adjusting fees. We're probably also making some level of adjustment to the service model. So I think we're talking about 2 different things here that may both be happening or only one may be happening. But it is whether or not the new service model is what your existing client base is looking for. So I remember what feels like now, way back in the day, I was looking for a job and talking with an advisor that had 100 or 150 million AUM, and it was a very active management, investment centric firm, and they were looking to transition into doing financial planning. And what I think they found over time was that their clients didn't want financial planning. They actually wanted investment management. They wanted
That's why they came to them and gave them their money.
Exactly. And so in that instance, that's a little bit easier of a conversation, because if you have AUM only clients that say, I only want investment management, just keep charging them AUM and move on. Set a minimum fee to be sure you're profitable. If you have been doing financial planning for free as part of the AUM service, and now you're looking to charge for it, that is a tougher conversation, because you're essentially saying, hey, one, we're going to be changing the fee structure. If fees are going down, good for them. But if they're going up, you have to be able to support that with a rationale. And if you're breaking away from a broker dealer and you're saying, hey, we're going to be adding all these new services and I wasn't allowed to charge you for planning, but now that's going to be the center of my business, that's obviously a different scenario. But I do think this is a tough conversation. And I know a lot of advisors elect to ultimately leave their existing clients where they are and use the new service model, the new fee structure with new clients, simply because the risk of making that shift and losing a couple of clients is greater than the benefits, the financial benefits that they foresee happening. But I also wonder if that fragments their business, because they end up with sort of these 2 service models and they're trying to do it essentially, they're serving 2 different clients under one roof.
I think you're absolutely right that where or how you position this, just in practice in the real world, really depends on what you were doing already and what your clients perceive you to be doing. If the reality is you were already doing financial planning plus investment management for an aggregate investment management fee, flipping clients to a retainer fee is going to be challenging because they're used to having it all bundled together. Now, it's easier if you flip them to a retainer fee that's also cheaper, but then at some point you're just like, hey, I came up with an awesome idea to change my business. Let's take less revenue with less upside for no reason. It's not a you can do that one. They'll probably be on board, but I wouldn't actually recommend it from wearing my business consulting hat. I mean, the reality is AUM still continues to work pretty darn well for clients that actually have investment portfolios that they want to be managed. And as many of you have heard on this podcast before, Alan and I still go back and forth on this a little bit. But, I think we're going to find that the AUM model sticks around way longer than a lot of people are giving credit to it for people that actually have investment portfolios to be managed, where you can deliver either investment management only or investment management plus financial planning for that aggregate fee. The reason why we're so optimistic around monthly retainer models, including what we do here at XY Planning Network, is because when you're working with a lot of younger folks, there's no portfolio. There's no assets. Your AUM fee will be 0. So going out with an AUM model is completely useless. You have to come at people with something different that's more effective and a better match. And so those are the situations where retainer fees work and AUM fees are a problem. So when you're looking at this kind of transition, I mean, I think, Alan, you said it well. If if your clients are already used to doing something in this holistic investment management plus financial planning for an AUM fee, frankly, I would ask, like, why do you even feel the need to switch? What's actually the pain point that's broken in the model? If the issue is small clients, then absolutely set a minimum fee. I'm actually much more of a fan of a minimum fee than a minimum asset size.
Yep.
Set a minimum fee, provide a good holistic service, and let people decide whether they want to pay for it. They might have no assets and just say, hey, your minimum fee of X $1,000, I like your holistic services. I don't even care about the investment management part. I want the financial planning, and I'm happy to pay for it. I'm just going to pay for it from something else. So, setting a minimum fee, that certainly works, and you can structure it as a monthly retainer. And it sounds like this is more the situation for this person. If you weren't really doing much financial planning before, it was really mostly investment only, and now you're adding in financial planning, I think realistically the most conducive path for you is to do a hybridized fee model. So to say, all right, we do financial planning, and the financial planning costs $200 a month or whatever your number is. And if you want us to continue to manage your portfolio, we're happy to continue to manage your portfolio, and it's whatever your AUM fee currently is. And I would just literally go to clients to say, hey, we're rolling out this new service, and here's what we're going to do, and here's what it costs. And the biggest caveat that you're going to have to go through is if you got a couple of clients that maybe you were kind of answering a lot of financial planning questions for on the side, you're going to have to decide for them, are you actually going to say to them, hey, if you want this kind of financial advice in the future beyond just your portfolio, now we're going to be charging for it. And so you may have a handful of clients where that's a little bit more of a pressured conversation you have to have. Although if they value the service, if you're really doing stuff for them that's that valuable for them and they're appreciating it that much, you may find that conversation is much scarier to you than it actually is a problem for the client.
Yeah, and I completely agree. Now, I will say that when I was at Abacus, after Abacus Wealth Partners bought my RIA, one of the things that we talked a lot about was actually the transition, because that firm had always been pure AUM and was moving to an actual monthly retainer structure for all, I think, 1,200 clients. It was going to be a very long process, but they were shifting it. Now, I believe in some ways that came with maybe a little bit of a reduction in the AUM fee. But it really was a conversation around, hey, over time, our service models changed. And over time, the value proposition has changed. Now, this is a firm that's been around for, 20 plus years. So, the clients that have been there for 20 years have seen the change of being very investment, retirement focused to being more, comprehensive financial planning focused. And so if you've been in business a long time and you have some of those longstanding clients that sort of have been with you on the ride and their service model has changed, I do think there's a place to be able to say, hey, look, our fee structure no longer represents the value proposition that we have, and it no longer represents the services that we offer. I think it's fair to say, client, we are charging you, all of our fee is based on the market, which we can't control. But the real value of this service model is financial planning. And so we think it's appropriate to charge for financial planning. So with all of our new clients, the way that we work with them is we charge a monthly subscription fee or a quarterly fee or annual retainer, whatever your fee structure is. And so we'd like to start transitioning our existing clients over to this new fee structure because we think it better represents the value that we provide our clients. I think that's an appropriate conversation. So I'm not going to say that, you can't make this change. I think there is a way of presenting it and setting it up so that the clients understand why you're doing it. I will also add the piece too that our clients tend to be very sophisticated. And I think advisors sometimes are surprised when the clients are like, yeah, I've been underpaying you for years. I think we had Jake Keebler on the show, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago. I'd have to pull up the episode number, but I remember him telling the story about doubling a client's fee. And they're like, yeah, we always felt bad. We didn't think we were paying you enough, because these are savvy, sophisticated, professional clients. Like, they know what they're paying and the value of what they're getting. They know if they're not paying you enough. And you certainly will have some of those, clients that are just pinching pennies. But if they're showing up and paying our fees, they're looking for the value we provide. So I certainly think you can have this conversation.
And I will say overall, having talked to a lot of advisors that have gone through these kinds of transitions, we virtually we are our own worst enemies. We fear this conversation so much more than it's actually a problem for most clients.
It's true.
If you're looking at your client base and you've got 95, 97, 98% retention rates, they like you. They already like what you do. As long as you're not coming back to them something, well, kudos to Jake that managed to double his client's fee. I expect some people are going to balk a little at that.
Yeah, I would expect that as well.
But, most other just, hey, we're reworking our fees. And you just explain, look, we're reworking our fees and here's how it's going to work. And here's what we're going to do with you going forward. And, you still have to explain what is your value proposition and what are you going to do. And you have to make that case to justify your fee. But if they already like you and they're comfortable working with you, you'll be amazed at how not problematic the conversation is. You're going to find about 80% of your clients just say, okay, sounds good. 10 to 15% are going to have questions. Just they're intelligent, sophisticated people. They're going to have some questions. And somewhere between probably 5 and 10% of your clients, it'll be an issue for them. It'll be a real issue, and you'll have to talk through it. And you may lose some of those, and you may save some of those, but a few of them may move on. But it's you'll be amazed how many of them are just fine. Like, yeah, okay,
I totally
working
agree.
with you, trust you, like you. If you say this is how it works going forward, like, okay, as long as you explain to them what's in it for them, like, here's what we'll be doing for you, and here's what we'll be doing to value your fee. Particularly since this person said, they are expecting the client experience to go up, so you're going with good news. Just going with the good news and move forward.
Totally agree. All right, so switching gears, and this is interesting because it sort of plays into serving two different types of clients. So everyone get your shot glasses ready. Over the past couple of months, or probably even a year now, I realize I'm serving two completely opposite niches: retirement plans for businesses and serving Gen X and Gen Yers. Thus far, retirement plans for businesses have been the bulk of my business. So my first question is it feasible moving forward to continue to serve two different groups of people, or should I try and focus on just one? Since they are practically opposites, any materials that I create or share will basically require double the work because I have to create two of them. What do I do? And I will say, not to press too hard on this, but like if you say like I serve Gen X and Gen Yers, like that is not a niche. That's almost half the population of the United States. So it's possible here.
No one else serves them.
This is true.
Not a sustainable niche because eventually other people will, but I'd still make the case it's a niche.
It's very broad. Yeah, it's not specific enough. If you came to me and said like I serve, I do retirement plans for businesses and I work with young doctors, like I see that. When you say young professionals and then you say, retirement plans for business, I do wonder if this is like retirement plans for business is the bulk of the business, but it's like bringing in some other, just halo effect. It's bringing in some random young professionals. So it's a question we get all the time, right? Is what do I do if I've been a master generalist? I have a very wide range of clients and I want to start focusing. What do I do? And generally the answer is going forward, start your focus. Like you don't need to go through and just like fire half of your clients because they don't meet your new niche that you've decided to have. But like the truth is most of our clients never go to our website anyway. So like they may not even know if you start really focusing on one niche instead of one that includes them. Nor have I ever heard of a situation where a client was like, oh, well, I guess I'm no longer a good fit for this firm because you picked a different niche, 3 years into us working together. Usually if they're on board, they're happy, they're going to stay with you. But this is a tough call where, you're really looking at sort of two roads and trying to decide which one to go down, because it sounds like this person has been trying to bridge the gap and go down both of these roads for a long time. And now it's not going to work anymore.
Well, I don't think it's that hard of a decision. I'm hearing someone that says, the bulk of my business is in 401k plans, and I'm tired of doing double extra work for the people who are outside of my niche. Then stop doing the extra work for the people outside of your niche and focus where you're already building.
Yeah, no, it's a great point.
You're not only is this person already down the road, I mean, they said like the small business retirement plans is the bulk of their business at this point, but they're even acknowledging just some of the many problems that happens when you persistently try to serve multiple different markets at once. Like it gets a little tiring making two versions of all your marketing materials and two versions of your website and two versions of your agreements and two versions of your plans and two versions of everything that are just completely different because you're serving completely different people. And that ignores the real challenge that starts to crop up, which is what are you going to do when you get a young professional networking meeting that falls at the same time as an approach talk for a small business retirement plan? Which one are you not going to go to? Because you're going to have to pick one.
Yeah.
And those decisions added up are going to add up to one of two things. Either you're going to keep picking the 401k path, the 401k approach meetings, and you're not really going to gain any traction with the young professionals because you keep missing their networking meetings. Or you're going to start going to the young professional networking meetings, and you're going to begin to lose momentum and growth in your 401k business because you're not showing up for those pitches and approach talks and RFPs anymore. Our time is limited. And when you scatter too many shots at the same time, like, I'm certainly not a hunter, so this is not the best analogy, but like, you're going to bring down more big game with a rifle than you are with a shotgun from a mile off. Like,
right.
You lose too much impact with the scatter shot. At some point, you have to get targeted if you want to gain momentum. And it sounds like you already have. You're just having trouble letting go of the other business that isn't really core and central to your business. It's just dragging down time, which you're now noticing. So
yeah, it's the people that are fogging the mirror, but they pay the bills, and it's hard to turn that business away. But, I actually think being in this sort of area, focusing on retirement plans for small businesses, like this is a great area to focus on, because I think this is an area that is like, that desperately needs more focus, particularly from the fee-only advisory world. So I think it's a great niche to serve and a great place to focus. But I agree that if the situation is just, you're sort of pulling in these outside, younger clients that don't really fit your ideal client profile, it would be nice to be able to step away from that. Now, I could imagine a world where you're serving the business owner and the plans for the company or something like that. Like maybe there is a little bit of, spillover in who you end up serving, but, random, 35-year-old that shows up and is asking for financial planning services because they heard your name or saw your name on the NAPFL website or XYPN Network's website, it's okay to send them to someone else, that's going to be better suited to serve them.
Well, you only get so much time and so many clients that you can serve before you run out of hours on this earth. So, it's a lesson that every advisor has to go through. And if they don't, they just hit a wall and they become miserable in their practice because they've got too many clients and they're drowning in the practice and they can't even find any time to come up for air and try to fix the practice. And they're spending immense amounts of time because every client, they have to spend the time and do the research and figure out all the stuff for them, because that's what happens when every client is different.
Yep.
And they get stuck in it and don't even realize it. And it's a trap that most of us fall into, because when you're early on and you've got lots of time and not a lot of clients, it feels very easy to keep saying yes to everyone because you just want anyone that brings revenue in the door. And I can't entirely fault anyone for that. But the moment you hit the crossover where you're no longer just trying to fill empty time on your calendar, because you look at your calendar and like, wow, between the existing clients I've got and all the other stuff I'm working on, I don't actually have much spare time on my calendar anymore. The moment you hit that point, you have to start making these decisions. And not making a decision and saying yes to everyone is still a decision. It's just, oh, well, I was meeting with another client that was outside of my niche, so I didn't have the chance to respond to that retirement plan RFP that turned out to be a $30 million plan that I would have gotten because the other person pitching it was an idiot, except I didn't show up because I didn't have any time to finish the RFP because I was doing plan for a client to make $1,000. And I missed the $30 million plan. Those are the kind, and you won't realize what you've done to yourself because you never go to deliver the RFP and you never see the plan, you never see the business that you missed. But that's what happens. Eventually, you start losing opportunities when you're spread too thin. It's not a big deal when you got lots of time and not very many clients. But as soon as you fill your time and clients become your capacity limitation, who you work with and where you spend your time is crucial. If you really, for this advisor, if you really want to go down this road and you're at the capacity limit that it sounds like you're already at, since you're asking the question and commenting and complaining about kind of the double time it takes, either find a partner or hire an advisor, and their job is all of these people. You don't see them anymore. right?
Yep.
You can build a business out of this. If you want to see all of the Gen X and Gen Y, great. Get 1,000 of them, hire 10 advisors, and never see one yourself. That's what it means to build a business and not just serving the clients yourself. But if you want to serve them yourself and you want to serve everyone, you can't because there's only so many hours. So at some point, you have to start making these decisions. And again, it sounds like you're already feeling some of that pain. So
you're already there.
It's okay to just focus where you're doing well. At some point, that's how you have to grow.
And I will warn you that this is not like this continuum that you slowly begin to realize you're getting busy and all of that. This will hit you like a brick wall. You will just one day run into a time wall and go, crap, what just happened? This is not something you see coming a long way off, especially as a new business owner. As you grow, I think you can start building in some processes for monitoring just how many hours you're spending in various areas. But yeah, those walls come really fast and you have to get good at saying no. And it's just a reality of being a business owner that over time, you're going to end up saying no more often than you say yes. And that includes to new clients. So, all right. So switching gears just a little bit again. We had a great question in the VIP group, which had a great discussion there, but I wanted to be sure listeners got the opportunity to hear the answer to this as well. And that is, can you elaborate on what it means to have level fees under the new Department of Labor fiduciary ruling? While the AUM and retainer models seem fine, I continue to hear different interpretations of whether it means you can give discounts going forward. If you've given discounts, do you have to standardize for past clients and how all that works? So before we jump in, I will say actually the most popular episode in XYPN Radio's history, I believe, is episode 44, when Michael and I talked about, well, really, I interviewed you about the Department of Labor fiduciary ruling after you wrote a 7,500-word blog post about it. So if anyone wants to listen to that episode, it's great. Go to xyplannetwork.com/44. That's 44. But let's just talk about level fees. What does it mean to have level fees? Does this mean I have to charge 1% AUM to all of my clients and I can never have breakpoints?
No, the only thing level fee fiduciary means is for any particular client you are currently working with or talking to, if they give you another dollar, do you earn the same level fee no matter where the dollar goes? That's all it means. So like whether you buy stocks or bonds or alts or whatever else it is you want to buy on this planet, as long as the fee is the same, no matter where they steer the money, you are a level fee fiduciary. So I can be a level fee fiduciary for client number 1 at 1% and client number 2 at 6%. Or 0.6%. 6 would be kind of abusive.
Yeah, hopefully not.
Hopefully not. I can charge clients different fees. I can charge every client in my client base a different fee. I can have graduated fee schedules. I can charge you 1% on the first million and 0.5% on the next million. None of that matters. All that matters is when the client gives the next dollar, do I earn the same compensation no matter where it goes? Because if I work under a broker-dealer environment, the answer is no. I get a lot more to send it to certain commission-based products than I do other products. That's the point of that. That's the level fee we're trying to set here is I make the same money no matter where I steer the client's investments, so I have no conflict around the investments. The fact that you charge some people more than others or that you charge more for the first million than the second million doesn't matter. What matters is when they give you the next million, do you make the same 0.5% no matter what you invested in? That's what being level fee means.
It's a great point that the broker-dealers are certainly dealing with this more so than fee-only advisors. But there are a percentage, and I don't know how large of a percentage, of advisors that are fee-only fiduciaries that this is going to affect you. And I think back to when I worked at Rick Kaler's firm, we charged a different percentage on real estate investments than we did, the mutual fund investments. So that could be an issue if we are advising a client to save money into their IRA versus buying more real estate, because about a third of our portfolio was real estate. So that is an issue now with level fee because we have an incentive to push them into one investment over the other because our fee is higher.
Well, and the most popular version of this conflict that definitely does come up for some advisors is all of those folks who charge more for equities than they do for fixed income, or said another way, they charge lower AUM fees on the bond portfolio than the stock portfolio.
Is that pretty common? I haven't ever seen that before. So
yeah, there's a material chunk of advisors out there that do that. We charge 1% for equities, but only 0.7% for the fixed income portfolio because there's just not as much to do there in a low yield, low interest rate environment. No offense to any bond managers, just that's the case that people make.
Yeah, I would expect to see that more from like, I don't charge on cash holdings and I don't charge on like legacy assets or something like that.
Not charging on things you don't manage is not a problem, right? The level fee fiduciary rule is about what you get paid on the things you manage, not the things you don't manage. But if I charge 0.7 on fixed income and 1% on equities, I can increase my comp by 50% anytime I want. Just take all the clients' fixed income portfolios and dump them over in equities. And my fee just went up about 50%, 42. So that's a problem. And that's not a level fee.
Okay. So if I use TD Ameritrade and my client has a few different accounts, one of them is a brokerage account where they want to hold $500,000 in cash because maybe one day they're going to buy a house. And I say, I'm not going to charge you on that 1%, or I'm not going to charge you 1% on that cash because I'm not doing anything with it. So you're saying because I'm not technically managing it, is it because it's at my custodian? Does that mean I'm managing or no?
If your client came in and said, I have $500,000 in my checking account, I'm not going to give it to you because it's in my checking account. You are not in breach of level fee fiduciary because you're not charging the client on money you're not managing.
Okay, that makes sense.
The fact that it happens to be in a non-managed account in TD Ameritrade as opposed to a non-managed account in their community bank up the street is completely irrelevant. Money you don't manage is money you don't manage. If you're not managing, you're not advising on it, you're not getting paid on it, you can't not be level fee when you're not doing anything for it.
Yeah, so this is really, that's interesting because I could see getting into an argument with a regulator about that one, but I do understand what you're saying.
Well,
so this is more common.
Anytime you tell a client to invest cash, you still have to have a justification for why you're doing it. I mean, you still have to explain that as you would in any context, but it's not a lack of a level fee because the client has some asset on this earth that I don't already manage and don't get paid for. Right. I mean, if you otherwise it'd be like, hey, your client has a house, you don't get paid on it. That's a breach. I'm like, right. No, they just have a house I don't manage.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Literally, I'm thinking of the scenario where you literally have the assets at the custodian. So maybe what you would do is just not be the advisor on that account and just have it be a retail account if you really want to play it safe. But it sounds like this is,
or just have it be a non-managed account.
Non-managed. So this is going to be much more common.
If it's not managed and there's no advisory agreement and there's no billing and there's no charging and there's no fee, like you can't breach a level fee by not having a fee.
Right.
You breach a level fee by having a not level fee. Now, if you're going to go down the road of we manage portfolios with discretion and we can put people in cash, and if we put them in cash with discretion, we don't charge on the cash that we are managing, that's a problem. Because, a funny thing, when advisors have discretion over cash and don't get paid on cash, guess how often the client has a large cash position?
Never.
Right. Like, man, you'll find some ultra short-term bond if you got to, just to, because you don't want to actually take unnecessary risk, but like, I'll find anything to invest you in so it's not cash so that I can still get paid, right? Like and I have discretion. That's a problem because now I control my own compensation by moving clients in and out of cash. So having discretion over something that you don't get paid on can still be a problem because you can dial your comp up and down by, going in and out of that investment. But again, that's because you are managing it. You have discretion over it. You're at least giving advice on it and getting paid for it to specify whether it should be in cash or not, recognizing that you get paid more when it's not. But just the fact that clients hold non-managed accounts that you don't bill on that own things is not a breach of level fee fiduciary.
Makes sense. All right. Gotta love the intricacies of all of this. So back to the original point is that this has nothing to do with discounting. So this is only that each client must have a level fee for themselves. If you want to give your, a family member 50% off your fee, feel free. That's not going to be an issue.
Yep. And don't worry about breakpoints. I mean, that's really the one I see that worries people the most. Like I charge 1% on the first million and then 0.8 on the next and then 0.5 on the next. So like the fees change as you go. It's not a problem because for that next million or whatever it is, you're going to, whether it's 1% or 0.8 or 0.5, you're going to get that fee no matter what they invest in. That's the driver.
Right. Makes sense. All right. So probably coming up on our last question here. This is one that I get all the time around what technology to use in terms of investment management. So cases for and against performance reporting. What are other types of reports being provided to younger clients, if any? How are they being tracked? How are they being received? And all of that. So this is certainly a question because, historically we have run extremely detailed, 60-page quarterly reports that have more numbers than a CFA can figure out what's in them. And a lot of charts and graphs and standard deviations and just all this stuff, right, that we printed out of our very expensive performance reporting software. And we mailed it to our clients on a quarterly basis. And usually by the time it got to them, it was almost the next quarter from my experience. And obviously our younger clients are asking for more access. They're asking for easier access to the information. But what information are we trying to give them? And I know that this comes up a lot of, do I run reports quarterly? Do I deliver them? Do I even talk about it? Do I just give them a portal to see the numbers? And I think it really depends. I mean, obviously it depends on the clients, but I guess what are you seeing from advisors that are working with younger clients on sort of where they're centering on how to do performance reporting for younger clients?
So I'm watching this play out in a few different ways. First and foremost, almost everybody that's going down this road gives clients just some kind of portal that they can log into and see, rather than like we're going to manually print and mail out quarterly reports. I think that's just kind of an artifact of the past that's slowly dying. I mean, we printed quarterly reports because it was too time intensive and cost too much postage to send monthly.
Right.
Like there was nothing sacred about quarterly. It was just, we decided administratively it was a cost worth dealing with. Now we have the internet. Like we're past this phase. And, I still know a number of advisors that say like, yeah, but my clients spend so much time scrutinizing the quarterly statements. I don't want to give them a portal with year-round access, or they're just going to freak out about it year-round. But in reality, what I find, and we've seen this with some of our own clients, it's actually basically the opposite. So imagine this for a moment. You're working with an advisor who has your entire life savings. Now, you want to be a good and diligent consumer. You want to take care of yourself and your family. So you want to make sure you feel like you're on top of how your portfolio's doing, right? Like it would be embarrassing to never check it out and then find out your advisor had completely screwed something up. So you kind of want to stay on top of things. And your advisor says to you, here's a piece of paper that tells you how you're doing. I'm not going to show you another one for 3 months. What would you do? You'd scrutinize the hell out of that piece of paper because you're like, this is the last one I'm going to see for 3 months. If I miss one of these things, it could be 6 months before I have any idea what in the world is happening with my life savings. So when you tell people their access to information is restricted, they get even more anxious and focused on what little tidbits you're willing to share with them, which creates a lot of focus on quarterly statements. When clients get year-round access to their portfolio performance reports through a portal, most of them don't even bother ever logging on. That's actually been one of the ironic problems for a lot of companies that roll out portfolio performance like portals on their website. They go through all this effort and they roll the whole thing out, and 15% of their clients log in and look at it.
Right.
And the truth is that like 1 in 6 clients that actually bothers to log in and look at it, if they were that and look at it regularly, if they were that anxious about it, I guarantee you they were already looking all the time. They were looking on Yahoo Finance or Google Finance or MarketWatch or CNBC or whatever it is that they look at. Like, they're not suddenly obsessing about their portfolio all the time because you gave them the internet. Like, the internet's been here 20 years, and if they're people who obsess about it, they've already been following their portfolio on the internet. You simply gave them, hopefully, a better way to look at it and more accurate information because you can make sure it's presented properly when it's your portfolio performance report. So the starting point is getting that information out there into some kind of portal. The second option that goes with it that I am seeing a few of our XYPN advisors do is they're saying, you know what? We're just going to show you what the account balances look like through your financial planning software. Mm-hmm. So, any number of the tools that do account aggregation, like, hey, you used to have $20,000 in your 401k. Now it's up to $23,000. Awesome job. You're making progress. And they don't spend a lot of time doing detailed performance reports, because the truth is, for those that are still in the saving phase and the early accumulation phase, whether they save is radically more important than the actual performance of their savings.
Right.
You got to get 10 plus years into your savings before you've cumulatively saved enough that the performance actually has a more material impact than just the fact that you saved. And so I think for a lot of people that are still in the savings phase, just that level of detail around performance reporting is overkill, and overkill to the point that some advisors are finding, if I just don't even give that information to my clients, they don't ask for it and they don't care. Now, as the dollar amounts get larger, they're likely to care more. You still need to, at some point through the year, do your appropriate investment due diligence about how are these things doing and are they performing well relative to benchmarks. Like, that's not a complete cop-out to not still do your due diligence on investment advice that you're giving. But detailed performance reporting for people that are still in the early saving phase, not only is it probably not really material information, but most of them probably don't actually care to look anyways, because either it doesn't tell them anything useful or they've never even looked at a performance report before and wouldn't know how to interpret it anyway. So they're certainly not going to miss it if it's not there.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that for younger clients, the focus needs to be progress towards goals. Are you on track? And investment returns certainly help. But to your point, like when you're in your 20s and 30s, investment returns is not what's going to get you to retirement. It's the fact that you're saving for any of your goals. And while investment returns can help and certainly will go up and down based on the market, clients really need to be able to see, are they on track for what they stated their goals were, or do we need to make adjustments to the goals? So, I think that the information that comes out of custodians, for instance, is pretty solid. It's not detailed performance reporting, so it's not going to replace an Orion or a Black Diamond or anything like that. But honestly, especially for your younger clients, it's probably sufficient. I know a lot of folks are looking for more household aggregate level reporting, so they want to be able to pull in the 401k and things like that. There are some systems that do that. A new one on the scene is Capitec. They've been at our conference, or they were at our conference last year. Blue Leaf is also in this category of sort of, it's more client portal, and it allows you to see all of the various, accounts in one place. I'm not sure if eMoney runs any, because they're also a very popular account aggregator, but I don't think they run any actual performance numbers. I know Capitec and Blue Leaf do. So if you really want to be able to show sort of household investment performance, you could, because the truth is probably most of their assets are in held away accounts anyway, and that's really the bulk of their returns. So, but I do think it needs to be tied back into the planning software. To your point, it really needs to be seen through the eyes or through the lens of, am I on track to accomplish my financial planning goals?
Well, and I think there's an important distinction here as well. Like, knowing if I'm on track for my goals is about how I, as the client, am doing towards the goals that I set and whether I'm making progress. Performance reporting is about, frankly, whether you, the advisor, are doing a decent job managing the portfolio.
True.
Like, that's why I look at it. I don't look at a performance report so I know how I'm doing relative to my goals. I look at a performance report so I know how you're doing relative to whether or not I should fire you for doing a bad job on the portfolio. And so on the one hand, when you get into clients with more moderate account balances where the truth is the returns aren't really even the driver anyways, yes, some due diligence should still be done at some point, but doing quarterly or more frequent scrutiny of how the advisor is doing on the performance of an account where a 1% return difference is like 2 weeks worth of Starbucks coffees just doesn't matter in the grand scheme of
toast.
Things. It's not productive for the advisor or the client.
Yeah.
Now, from the flip side, I know a lot of advisors at some larger advisory firms that have affluent clients that do very detailed performance reporting and say, gosh, I wish we could get away from this performance reporting and just benchmark clients to goals because that's what matters for the client. And I have to admit, I think for those firms, I think they're kind of dreaming because clients still want to actually verify, like, you run my life savings for 1% a year. I would like to verify you're doing a decent job.
Yeah.
Which means I need a performance report relative to a benchmark. Like, the fact that I'm doing great achieving my goals because I saved a ton of money and the market went up is not what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for is you manage my money and charge me for it. I would like to know whether you're doing a decent job. And so, people that are in the business of managing money and maybe also and doing financial planning, I don't think you can get away from performance reporting in any feasible future. It's still the primary way that the client evaluates the advisor's performance if you're managing the portfolio. But in a world where you're working with younger folks and you're trying to help them accumulate towards retirement, and the investments may frankly be simpler anyways, and it's really about, are you saving and are you on track towards goals? That's what clients want to know about, and that's where they're likely to be focused. And so that's the kind of technology I would give them, which basically means you're focusing more on financial planning software that has account aggregation, not portfolio performance reporting software. But the larger the clients, the larger the dollar amounts that you're managing, the more you're going to have to bring portfolio performance reporting to the table.
The more it matters. And fortunately, there are a lot of great players in this space that are very well established. Solid performance reporting is not cheap, but it is, if you're working with clients, like you said, if we're drawing that distinction between, basically, it's not an age thing, it's an account balance thing. That if you're working with larger account sizes, and I don't know where that line is, maybe $500,000, maybe it's $1 million.
Yeah, I think it's probably lower than that, frankly. I suspect once you get north of about $100,000, that people want to start knowing what's going on with the portfolio. North of $100,000, like a 1% return difference because you did a good or bad job is $1,000. $1,000 ain't trivial anymore. That's where spending a little time to make sure that things are getting done properly. So I suspect it's somewhere around that point where people at least start asking questions. And once you're up to $200,000 and $300,000 portfolios, you're gonna have to figure some process out. Now, if that's only a handful of your clients, heck, maybe you'll just get a license from Morningstar or some equivalent and just run them their own specialized report from time to time and not bother with full-on advanced portfolio account performance and accounting software. But once you've got a material number of clients at that level, I think you have to get there.
Yeah. And again, like if you have a few clients or you're growing that client base, we're also advocating for, you don't necessarily need to send them a report quarterly, right? You can give them access to the information and draw their attention to it during your meeting where you review it. But you don't, I do think the days of like, you need to email your client or put in a Dropbox folder or mail a client a quarterly report. It's just not necessary. The online portals are solid enough now. They give great enough information depending on, and it just depends what your tech stack is, what your custodian, what types of investments you use. So if you're pretty plain vanilla, it's going to give you more options than if you're using a lot of, non-traded REITs. Well, only some systems can handle that. So I'm not going to recommend any specific system. There are a lot of great ones out there, but definitely something to consider as your clients get larger. So that wraps up today's mailbag episode. So Michael, thanks so much again for taking the time to come on and share your expertise. I think we got through 5 questions, which I think is the top end. It's not quite 6. We could ask a real quick question to try to get to 6, but it's on the top end. So I'm excited.
I'll take that. That's pretty good.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Michael.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me back on. It's good to be back.
Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with myself and Kitces, and to finally find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.